Hey there, welcome. Today's video is about the innate perfection within all of reality. It's something that gets mentioned, something I've mentioned. It's kind of something we say about God, that God's perfect, all loving, all powerful. But this can rub the intuition the wrong way. The reason being is because we, see things like suffering, experience things like suffering, there are atrocities, and so on. I've kind of covered the problem of evil in past videos. I'll lightly touch on it here. But the innate perfection is often talked about in non-duality especially. So, in Advaita Vedanta, it's the fact that it's all Param Brahman. It's all the perfect, beginningless, endless God. In Dzogchen Buddhism, it's explicitly called the Great Perfection. It is the fact that infinite awareness and wisdom and luminosity and lucidity and compassion are found within every experience. Whether we consider our experience or our existence samsara or nirvana, whether we consider ourselves normal, mundane, or a Buddha. The great perfection pervades all of that. And that's something to sit with. One reason to sit with these teachings is quite simple. We don't know everything, and we know we don't know everything. And I think that that's a really important aspect to consider when we seek and contemplate and search for answers, when we are trying to understand our own consciousness and our own reality. I think it's important to see the limits of our sense perception, the limits of our scientific knowledge and data, the limits of verbal explanation, the limits of human record keeping. So that part, if we can overcome that, we make a lot of ground to understanding why everything is simply perfect. And not just perfect, it's like perfect, perfecting endlessly. It's infinity, infinitying, exponentially, eternally. It's really just beyond these kind of black and white, edge ends sort of thinking, where we think of things in boxes, we think of things with edges and ends and limits and beginnings and so on. And this is why you kind of see all this paradoxical language. You see these kind of phrases that say it's all bliss and it's all empty. It's all filled with suffering, and yet we're here for the complete joy of enlightenment. We can see a lot of sort of dualistic phrases being merged together to describe reality, but that doesn't really suffice for a lot of people. It just doesn't make sense. Even myself, sometimes I feel it's used too often. This it's positive and it's negative. It's good and it's bad, or it's infinite and it's finite. None are coming to the top of my head because I've been actively not thinking in this way. But it's both meaningless and exceptionally, significantly meaningful. It's both empty and yet filled with boundless parts and experiences and events. It's both God and formless, conceptless, not something you could relate to our humanness or our beingness. Something way beyond that, something far less and far more complicated. Those are just examples of ways of speaking that are common, but it's kind of just to kick our mind a little bit, kick our attention and our focus out of its habits a tiny bit. The main first point I'm making is that we know our sense data is limited. We know this. We know animals can sense various frequencies and wavelengths and light waves, even proprioceptively experience vibration to much, much greater degrees than we can. And we know, at least intuitively, philosophically, some do know, we don't know what that experience is like. We don't know what the experience earnestly with our own eyes is like to see heat. We don't know what our experience is like with our ears to experience super low frequency sounds. Same with smell, for comparing it to a dog. Same with certain vibrations, comparing it to maybe an insect that have antennae and other qualities of their biology that obviously allow them to sense things that we can't, and we know this. I say this a lot, I mention this a lot because this is such a good doorway. It's a beautiful doorway into God, into reality, into this moment, into not being so haughty. It's a doorway into so many realms of consciousness that are very important, and they're all kind of united in the experience of awakening and realization and love. From dismantling speciesism to dismantling our ego, thinking we know things, dismantling our preconceived notions and judgments and beliefs, and putting a stop to our conclusion creating mind. We create a lot of conclusions and assumptions in our head, and we like to sit on them, and we almost get prideful when we feel we have gathered certain conclusions. But none of this is actually reality, and we just take a second and we'll know that it's not. We know that our sense data is in full reality. It doesn't mean it's hallucination. To some degree it might be, but to a certain degree I think we can reasonably accept that it's seeing part of reality. Maybe just not all of it. Definitely not all of it. And then that's everybody. So all the humans for hundreds and thousands of years, they're not seeing everything. And they're making up words and labels and theories and hypotheses and testing and assuming and judging reality. And we share that with each other. And we build on those. We build on those preconceived notions and categories and explanations of what our sense data experiences when our sense data isn't right anyways, not fully. And the funny thing is, it's a beautiful process because it's fine-tuning. It's perpetually fine-tuning itself, self-correcting, finding more and more accurate ways to identify reality and understand the constituent parts of reality and how it all works. This is like a scientific process. Even kind of the process of the psyche and the consciousness in yoga to some degree, not to the same rigor, not with the same equipment, because it was thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, but there is a process there. And so our own self doesn't know reality. We can actually understand that easily. Second, the human spirit, the human egregor that is our species, collecting data and accumulating it and trying to understand on a mass scale and through to the future. We keep our memories alive, we keep our information alive so that other people can build upon it. That's also erroneous and imperfect and still self-correcting, and most likely will forever. So it's not like useless, it's not bad, it's not impractical, it's just still not reality. And we know this. And this process of self-correcting was still happening thousands of years ago in the Dharmic yogic traditions. And they all amass into, pretty much all of them, even if it started out with different roots, they pretty much all amass into non-duality. The Vedas from pre-1500 BC to the Upanishads of 800 BC and going forward into the Bhagavad Gita, and then the current CE millennias into Ashravakra Gita and Avadhuta Gita and Yoga Vasishtha and Shankaracharya, Gaudapada, all the way up to Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharishi and Neem Baba. All of it amounts to non-duality. From pre-recorded history, 2000 BCE maybe, just hundreds and hundreds of years past, but the evolution is continually fine-tuning this non-duality, this oneness with God, oneness with reality, and they are often the pinnacles of the teaching. Even Shaivism, which was kind of on the side of Hinduism, oftentimes these things are ritualistic, almost animistic, worshiping nature and images and ideas and concepts and virtues, and doing different, mind training patterns like puja or worship, and the different offerings we give to the deities, the different techniques. And yet Shaivism also evolved into non-duality, even though roots of Hatha Yoga evolved into non-duality. When you research one of the main sections of the Nata yogis, which are the yogis that basically predominantly created Hatha Yoga, they're not the only ones, but predominantly, you can see the lineage of Nisargadatta Maharaj and his teacher, I think, Siddhi Rameshwar. Super spontaneous non-duality, and that's Anatta tradition. Go into Buddhism, the way the Buddha talked wasn't really non-dual from most of the Pali Canon we have. It's pretty dry, it's pretty simple, a lot of about ethics and compassion and mindfulness and letting go, and there's a few things that can be interpreted non-dual, I'm sure, but the non-duality really started to come with the evolution of the Mahayana into the Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism around, probably I think 600 BC, 600 CE, 700 CE with Garab Dorje, maybe 800 CE. Interestingly enough, that's a similar time as Gaudapada, Shankaracharya teacher. The point is that, one, we can't take our scientific knowledge as the end-all be-all, especially what we have right now. We know we're going to get better, more accurate knowledge. Can't take our own sense data to be the end-all be-all. Doesn't mean we can't use it and function with it, but using our understanding of its limits and thus not perceiving all of reality, even if we want to look at science and see that, there's so many questions, like what's dark energy and what's dark matter and what's happening quantumly We know to some extent there's stuff happening quantumly. What really is happening in, molecules and atoms and with electrons and protons and neutrons and quarks and all these other smaller and smaller particles, like, are these particles even actually existing, or did we just kind of make things come out through our technology and our separation? Even in anatomy, we discovered fascia far more recently than we discovered, bones and muscles groups, right? And this changes how we think of the body, and it's more of this interconnected unit that parts speak to each other almost fluidly through fascial webs. And that knowledge we're always gathering this knowledge, we're always learning more. And it's beautiful, but we can't sit on it, Like, we can't just oh yeah, this is reality. When someone asks you a question, or the spirit asks you a question, or your consciousness asks you a question, or if infinity presents you with spiritual inquiry, the appropriate answer isn't like something from biology or something from physics. And we know it isn't, because we know those are incomplete. And it's good to sit with that. We should use them and keep developing them, because they prove effective in the temporal sphere of human life, but they're not reality. And if we do seek spiritually, we do search, and we are on this path of yoga and dharma and Buddhism and meditation and so on, we gotta take into account the predominant evolution of all the lineages of yoga, pretty much. Not all of them, but majority of them. How they lead to union, non-duality, to realizing a boundless, measureless coexistence with all planes of being, and how that is beyond our description, beyond our understanding in a human anthropomorphic sense. And this is where we get understandings of like God and intelligence and bliss and great compassion, and how it's just perfect. So it's good to let go of our limited view, which excess knowledge tries to convince us is true. Kind of accept that, alright, the yogic lineages overall do kind of lead to this infinity, this infinite oneness. They're not all there, but most do, and it's hard to escape it in terms of like actually studying yoga and the texts and different things. Even if a rereading of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras without assuming certain things about it, you'll see the non-duality even in that. And then to understand what a measureless, boundless being could be. And understanding how something infinite, something without ends, without a beginning, without any sort of limitation or real boundary, something that can't be fettered, tethered, tarnished, phased, that's so much better than the idea of perfect, the idea of something amazing and beautiful like a deity. And we kind of have to accept that reality most likely is infinite. We have no evidence that it's finite. Like I said, even all our limited sense data, we always find some other being that is adapted to sensing beyond ours. And then we find, even with our technology, new and new aspects of existence and physics and chemistry and so even geology that we couldn't understand or detect before. And there's no end in sight. We have no edge to the universe. We have no real limit to space. Through the understandings of quantum mechanics and even just atomic physics, it almost seems like you can go down, down, and down more and more if you have the right equipment. Even the Big Bang is put into question as a theory. We really don't know. Scientists, not all, but many, believe in the multiverse or a multi-dimensional reality. There's nothing to our knowledge, even in the limited, that suggests existence, reality in the universe is limited. Temporarily might be limited, like there's laws or tendencies, but there are people and scientists and revered scientists who don't even believe the laws of physics always will act the same. Some will believe that maybe gravity or maybe, density or how molecules and atoms hold together, these consistencies could be different in another universe, could be different even in different parts of our universe, in a different galaxy, being pulled by a different black hole. There are many theories out there, and the theories are beautiful. We don't have to believe any of them, but they also suggest that we don't know the limits of reality, and we have no reason to believe the whole is limited, even if for a sliver of time things look limited. So these are all gateways, and I know I've been talking a lot, and it's like a psychological, deprogramming to go in and let go of our sense of knowledge, our sense of truth, which is often materialistic, scientific at this day and age, and see that this isn't the case. And then I see that if we tend towards yoga and spiritual inquiry, that they pretty much all are going to end up to the same moment, here and now, as infinite, as one. And when we realize that we have no reason to believe the holistic existence of multiversal reality is bound or limited or small in any way, and understand that a measureless one is just way better and way more akin to what's actually happening, this is where we can get to innate perfection. And it's the main problem with believing or understanding or seeing or experiencing innate perfection is the problem of evil. And it's not even a problem because evil's a word, it is a label. It experiences and events that are associated to or cause suffering without really looking at the network of history and the complexity of the infinite web every being is a part of. And when you understand that infinite web, even just a little bit, you don't really see people as evil. You see patterns as worthy of being stopped for the sake of sentient beings that can suffer, but you don't see evil. No matter how vile and psychopathic it might seem on the surface, it is not in isolation, it's not in a vacuum. Yeah, I just spilled a bunch of coffee on myself. And the problem of evil is kind of just an assumption. It is not really what's happening. And just like we can see that we don't know all of reality, we can't say that we know, oh, this is evil, this is bad. And there is actually mainly just a social fear, I think, of seeing reality as perfect, because we don't want to justify bad actions, justify patterns of corruption and exploitation and abuse and oppression, genocide, murder as good or perfect. Even perfect almost feels in our minds better than good. But perfect is not limited to what we as humans think of as good and bad, that dualistic black and white, but not also just limited black and white. You know, you might call a wall white and then another painted wall black, when in reality there's like hundreds of other shades of black that are darker and hundreds of other shades of white that are way more pure and white. And when you really get down to it, it's like this, you know, inseparable grayscale. And that's a kind of akin to reality. It's a decent enough analogy. And the problem of evil isn't really a problem. It's basically things happen in infinity because there's infinite things, so obviously things happen. And some of them we really don't like. We really don't like for a lot of reasons. Mostly because we fear death and pain, and we don't like suffering in our own experience, and so we don't want other people to suffer, yet other people don't care, and so we see that as evil, and we label that and we give that a limited perception, when in some other people's minds it's justified, or their choices are more important than the sacrifices made, or somehow, you know, their greed outweighs the temporary lives of people they don't know. None of that's justifiable, but the thing is, in a perfect reality, which this is what this reality is, there's something more than what meets the eye, and that's why we're here. We're not here to just live 90 good years and it's over. It's nice, it's really awesome and nice if we live 90 good years. But we're here to learn about infinity. You know, to some extent, karma might exist where there's a balancing act within the infinite fractal of us that's happening beyond what we see. It's before we're born, it's after we die. And so balancing all that stuff, like those things kind of just interacting and occurring in a hyper intelligent manner, is what's happening. And so we can call that karma, we can call that destiny, but there are things to be grown and learnt from all experiences of infinity which are out of our control. And that helps us dive into our true self, no matter how seemingly evil and problematic they are. So the problem of evil is not a problem. And things are really innately perfect, but they're also perfecting. It doesn't mean they're static. There's no limit to perfection. And so I think it's good in this path to sit with accepting perfection rather than deriving problems and limits. Thank you so much for watching. Om Saram.